Chloe Treat, thank
Hi.
you for being on the show.
Hi, thank you for having me, Michael.
Okay, so just a disclaimer before we start, we know each other very well. In fact, you're marrying my brother, and so we are a very very close family now. Uh, and I've just been you know my passion for Broadway and musical theater and theater in general, and that's why I'm just I'm just inspired by what you and Or are doing. And the reason I asked for us to have this talk is because you've had the chance to choreograph and direct so many different shows now from all different landscapes, from the smallest little arenas to being to working on Broadway productions. And um, as much as I'm curious and passionate about this world, I know nothing really about choreography, about direction, and about theater. So for these 20 minutes, I want to learn as much as I can about your work. What are the challenges? What is it like being in theater in New York, in the theater hub of the world? So just tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from, and how did you even get to this place where you're at now?
So I am from Texas, and I grew up as a dancer. My grandfather was in theater, so I do have kind of a theater background, but I grew up as a dancer. And then in high school, I had some injuries and couldn't keep pursuing that, and kind of made in retrospect, really uninformed left turn and was like, I'll just go to theater school. So it was a little bit random. And in theater school, I quickly learned that I was not an actor, but I got really lucky in the program that I was in. We had to take directing. That wasn't true in all of the programs, but it was true in the studio that I was put into. And my freshman year, Rachel Chavkin was my directing teacher. And for those of you who don't know who she is, she's an incredible Tony Award-winning director. She recently directed Hadestown. She's the director of Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. And she ended up being kind of a mentor, collaborator, someone I've assisted throughout my career. But so how I got into it was kind of lucky in many ways. And I'm not sure that if I hadn't been put in that position, just based on where I was slotted in school, I would have been there. But yeah, so I started directing in college. And then the reason that I choreographed too is really just because I had a dance background. So I feel like choreography is best when it's just one other form that you're using to tell a story. So I think it's really a director's tool set, but it's just combined with information about dance, which I had. And so that is how I ended up as a director choreographer in the short.
So over the past few years, I every time I thought about what you're doing and the transition from choreography to direction, to somebody coming out of the theater world, it just sounds that it's not the same profession. It's different skill sets completely. And it was so weird for me how you were able to just so quickly make that smooth transition. Is it similar at all? Choreography and direction?
I actually think it's such a similar skill set. I was also a director first. So, before when I graduated school, the thing that I said that I wanted to be doing was directing. And really just through happenstance, which is a long story that isn't super interesting, I started getting all of these choreography jobs, but it was never what I wanted to be.
But Chloe, you were a choreographer on Broadway.
No, I was an associate choreographer on Broadway.
It doesn't matter. Who cares? But you worked on choreography on a Broadway production, which is literally the most prestigious place to be an associate choreographer, whatever you want to call it. But you were, the highest place you can get to. So you can't minimize it and say, yeah, I was a director and then I went to try choreography.
So I think it's the exact same skill set. I think it's a little bit like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a square kind of thing.
Yeah.
Both titles, you have to have an ability to interpret stories through the movement of bodies.
Yeah.
And so sometimes like a director deals more in staging, and then you're also in charge of how design is telling a story and how lights and costumes and how all of these elements are coming together. But that's really what a choreographer is doing as well. They just happen to have a specific vocabulary, which is dance, but it's also just telling a story through the movement of bodies. It's heightened. But I think that really the skill sets should overlap, and the kind of choreography and direction that I really like and respond to are when the choreography is putting the story first. I think for theatrical choreography, you know, there are a lot of places where like flashy choreography for flashy choreography's sake is great, like music videos, and like if you're choreographing Beyonce's concert, like you just want flashy, awesome choreography. But if you're working on a Broadway show, the choreography has to be there to serve the story and to be moving the story forward. So in that way, it really is the exact same job of a director. You just maybe have to speak a little bit of this additional language as well. I'm sure there's a tech metaphor to be made there, but I don't know what it is because I don't know anything about that.
Okay, so tell me, what is directing? I mean, you're given you have a show, you have a production that's coming up, and what's day zero? I mean, where do you even start with thinking of a show? For example, you did Spring Awakening, right? Not too long ago, and you're sitting there, and how do you even start with that?
Well, so it's really different if it's a revival or a new piece, because if you're directing a new work, then one of the things that you're doing, a huge part of what you're doing, is dramaturgy, and is developing the story and is working with the writers, because the story is very much still in progress. And, you know, in a Broadway production, for example, if a work is new, you're getting rewrites in previews. So even after the show is open and has an audience on Broadway, you're still making changes all the way up until opening night. So a new work, there's like this huge, huge additional layer of what you're doing as a director, which is guiding the story, changing the story, making sure that the story is telling itself in the best way that it can. So that's an added thing that happens on a new work. If you're doing a revival, you don't have that element, but then you have all of these additional things, which are like, if you're doing a revival, generally there's going to be some kind of new perspective that you want to take with it, because otherwise you're just like, why? So then you're thinking more about directorial concept and why am I wanting to retell this story now? And what about it? What about who I am as an artist can I do to look at it through a fresh lens? So those are kind of two different camps. But regardless, on day zero, you were the person who is in charge of coordinating all the different teams. So you're really the CEO of the company, and there are writers on a musical. There's usually a book writer, a lyric writer, and a composer. There's a costume designer, a lighting designer, a sound designer, a set designer. There's the cast, there's casting. And you were the person who is making sure that all of those worlds are speaking to each other to tell a story. So on day zero, I could talk about this for zero, you're slowly starting to decide what you feel like this world looks like with all of your different designers and your cast and your team, to move that vision forward.
So, you know, you're one of the most creative people that I know, and obviously directing is all about sitting back and saying, how can I put my own personality into this? But I can't help but also recall when I was back in high school and I did some musical theater productions, I looked at the director and I had the most amazing female director, Liran Yacobi, who was like a personal mentor of mine for so many years. And it's a leadership role just as much as it is a creative role. I mean,
very much so.
not just about coordinating the teams, which is a very difficult logistical task, but you have a cast of people of all ages, and you're spending this such an intensive experience with them, sometimes a difficult one, because they're tired, they're sick. You have to sometimes give them negative feedback and tell them, listen, what you're doing here is not working. So how much are you preparing for this leadership role, and what are the biggest challenges there?
There's so many challenges. I think the way that you prepare for it is just to do it and practice. And in the theater is really a community that still has kind of an apprenticeship model. It's very common to assist and or be an associate for people for long periods of time. So that's kind of the way that you train, which is that you're in the room, you're not the person leading, but you're watching. Sure. And you're saying what things you would steal and you're saying what things you wouldn't do. But then I think nothing really prepares you for leadership like leading. And then it's kind of trial and error. And I mean, for me, the things that are the most important are, I always want to be the most prepared person in the room. I don't think I can ask other people for the caliber of being put in the most work, like knowing the most, putting in the most hours, being the most prepared. I feel like that's one of the ways that you earn respect and can ask a lot from your team, is if they understand that you're putting in the work as well. So that's something that's really important to me. And then I think learning how to, especially with directing, where so much of it is asking people to interpret something emotionally. We're talking about really subjective things. It's trying to pull out a feeling from someone, or it's trying to get someone to move a certain way. And it isn't objective language. It's often really subjective. And one of the things that I think is practice, but is really important to me, is being a really clear communicator and finding ways to speak that are clear and focused, but also open-ended, so that people don't feel kind of trapped by them. I think that I'm good at it, but also it's hard, and definitely it's trial and error. And, I have a cast of around 30 kind of every 6 weeks. So it's also like learning a whole new group of personalities, and everybody responds to different things. And, it's just constantly being on your toes and being flexible.
So, most jobs in the world are, 9 to 5, 9 to 6. Even in the tech world, it's a very structured job. Usually, I'm not talking about the founder and entrepreneur, but usually jobs are structured, and what your milestones are for the week and for the day. And it seems that that being in a production, especially at the level that you're at right now, it's not a 9 to 5 job, and the intensity fluctuates dramatically from production to production, and also on the process of a production. So I'd love to hear a bit about the experience from your end. What is it like work-wise to be a director? When are the most intensive times?
I have a dear friend who is also a director choreographer, and she was saying, she was talking to her therapist, and she was like, you're not bipolar, but your life is bipolar, which I think is really legit for anyone who's in theater, because you basically have a new job every 6 weeks if you're on creative teams. And so you go from having nothing, which is hard. It's hard to have a routine and a life and stay kind of consistent. You go from being like, I'm in tech, I have 10 out of 12s, I work 6 days a week, that to nothing. And it does tend to fluctuate back and forth that hard. And, the other element of it, every production kind of has a similar flow, in that, like, at the start of rehearsals, you're in 6 or 8 hour days, and then in tech, it gets more intense, and then there's nothing. But part of my life is that I'm a freelancer, so I constantly also have to be looking for work. And I don't usually have a job that lasts more than a month. So that element of it, I think, is one of the most stressful.
So, what you're touching on, the working for 1 month at a time, and not really knowing what's going to happen 6 months from now. So most people, you know, you need the structure. And I know about myself that I love structure. And while I'm excited sometimes about not knowing what's going to happen next, which is what sort of we're all experiencing now in terms of Corona, and that's the next thing I want to talk about. It seems very, very scary, and you need a lot of personal resilience and grit to not just be a director in theater, but to do any job in theater, because you don't really know what's happening, and you have to just stay positive and keep looking and not take things personally when they don't work out, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's an immense amount of rejection. You know, I think if everyone applies for jobs and doesn't get them, and I think even very talented and successful people, that's a part of their life. But when you're in theater, you're just always applying for jobs. So the amount of rejection is so much more. You know, I get rejected a few times a month pretty consistently, and that is still with I work all the time. So it's not that I'm not getting things, you just get rejected a lot. And I think anyone in theater slash any artist, I mean, I think it's true for most mediums. We cry a lot, we go to therapy, we do self-care. Like it's really exhausting and it's really hard. And I have seasons where I feel so grateful for what I do and so in love with what I do. And like, I have endless energy to keep going. And then I have seasons where it's really hard and I want to go to medical school.
No, it's crazy. So Chloe, like what's happening now? You know, I was supposed to come to New York with my wonderful girlfriend and watch all these amazing shows, and all of a sudden everything's canceled. Nobody can go to shows. What's happening to the theater world? What do actors do right now? Like what do you do right now?
I mean, well, look at the unemployment numbers. It's everyone is suddenly unemployed. Our jobs are defined by gathering. And on the one hand, we're an incredibly creative group of people. So there's this amazing creativity and resilience happening. And you're seeing all of these kind of virtual platforms pop up. You know, I had friends who started this Instagram page, Theater Without Theater, that went viral, and they're posting something every night from a show that closed. And wow. Sam Pinkleton started this thing, Social Distance, which is like an online dance club, and people are so cool. Trying to do things. I'm directing a play reading online in the next few weeks, but it's not making up for I think it's like a way that we're filling not having things to do and the fact that we're creative, but it's not paying us, you know?
So on a global level, are things going to go back to normal afterwards? So let's say right now, next week, we social distancing is over and we can go back to our regular life. Is theater going to be the same?
You know, I think I'm probably not the person to ask that question. I think that's more like the producers and the artistic directors, because at the end of the day, so much of it is about money. I think if it ended today, it's been a short enough amount of time that things could go back to normal. I don't think it's going to end today.
Yeah.
I think you're hearing most Broadway producers say like all of the plays are going to close. A few of the musicals are going to make it through, but not many of them.
But from people's perspective, from a consumer perspective, do you think because, you know, in tech, a lot of people are saying, we're going to be so accustomed to working remotely that my new office might just stay the couch. Why should I go travel to an office if I can just stay here? So do you think people around the world are still going to have that passion and drive to go out to see shows if they can just stay at home and watch them on TV like they're doing now?
I think that people are going to be or at least I'll speak for myself, I'm so hungry to be in a room with people. I feel like actually, if there has been a trend before this of people being like, oh, there's Netflix, like I would rather just watch a story with my pants off than go to the theater. I think there's a chance that this actually makes theaters more appealing than they have. You know, there's been a decline in theater attendance throughout this century as streaming platforms and all other kinds of entertainment become more and more available. I hope that this creates a resurgence in the desire for live events. I feel that intuitively inside of myself. I always considered myself antisocial, and inside of this coronavirus quarantine, I'm like, I'm social and I miss people. So if anything, I think that, but then there's also just this huge question of, will theaters be able to stay open through this? And that's
Yeah.
not the department.
Well, I'm gonna stick to the optimistic note that there's gonna be a resurgence and people are going to rediscover the energy that's in the human gathering and seeing something live on stage and not artificial on the screen. And before we leave, I have to ask you the last question. What are 3 words that you would describe yourself?
3? Oh my gosh, that's so stressful. Don't make me do that. You do 3 words. I don't want to do that.
You give 2 and I'll give 1 about you.
Okay. Oh, this is so gross. It's like a college application. I mean, I won't give you words. I'm just refusing. But I feel like I really believe in stories. I think stories are super important. And I really believe in doing your homework and being prepared. Those are 2 things about me. I won't use words, too.
I think that's even better. Chloe,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
That was really great.
Bye, dear.